Yes, it's perfect.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Right, I am Rebecca Poland. I am an entrepreneur like many of you on this call. I am also a somatic healing coach and a meditation and mindfulness and yoga instructor. I'm really passionate about self-care and the interface between self-care and community care, that we do self-care in order to be more of use and of service to the people we love around us. And I'm trained in Hakomi, which is a somatic mindfulness-based psychotherapy. So everything that I teach is through a wellness lens and also a healing lens. So I'm passionate about mindfulness because it sets the foundation for not only peace and well-being, but also growth and change and healing. So this is a pretty important component of any wellness practice. It essentially is the foundation, because if you're mindful, then everything else falls into place because you're back in the present moment rather than in some part of you, your ego or your agenda or your anxiety or anything like that. Mindfulness is a key that unlocks so much. So without much further ado, I'll just mention that I am the founder of Soul Clarity. So I work with organizations, small businesses, nonprofit organizations. I provide mindfulness instruction, stress management workshops, and self-care workshops. I could talk about everything I'm talking about today for a full weekend, and so I will try to keep it short. My intention today is mostly just to give you a couple of practices. So we'll do a body scan and we'll do a meditation, and I'll just give you enough of a few bits and pieces of why this stuff works, and then we'll get into practice so that your lunch hour is, or your lunch half hour is, nourishing and supportive. So I do invite an inquiry. Looks like we're not doing much on the chat. You're welcome to type in a chat, but the inquiry is just an invitation to ask yourself, what is my emotional and mental state right now? And as you ask that, just notice what happens. How does your attention shift? So you've been on this virtual summit for a couple of hours, some of you, and your attention is on a screen, your attention is on each other, your attention is, you know, if your camera is on, is how do I look in the camera, right? It happens. And notice what happens when you ask yourself, what is my emotional and mental state right now? It's a different kind of awareness that has to be turned inward. And even just being aware of that turning inward is a moment of mindfulness. It's a particular kind of awareness that I'll define for you today. So what I'll talk about in a nutshell is, you know, what mindfulness is, some benefits of it, just to give you some incentives. We'll spend most of our time on practice in this short amount of time I have with you. And I'll give you some tips for taking the practice home, and we'll wrap up. I also have a quiz to offer you that is how to use mindfulness to help you get unstuck. So I'll be putting a link to that in the chat. So for me, mindfulness is two things. Colloquially, it's thought of as a set of practices. It's doing mindfulness. But historically, and in the tradition of Buddhism that mindfulness comes from, which is a 2,500-year-old tradition, mindfulness is a state of awareness. Mindfulness was brought to the States in the 70s by Jon Kabat-Zinn in a form of mindfulness called mindfulness-based stress reduction. That's how most of us know it. And he was pulling from an ancient tradition, and with reverence to those roots. And Jon Kabat-Zinn defines mindfulness as paying attention in a particular way in the present moment on purpose. So there's this deliberateness that we have with mindful awareness that's different than everyday ordinary awareness. So it's a state of awareness, and it's a set of practices that are actually more focused on concentration. And we'll do a couple of those in the meditation that I lead, of watching the breath, noticing the body. These are points of concentration that create like a container, in the same way that this glass holds water. Concentration holds mindfulness. So that's a way to think about it, is the nice visual analogy. So mindfulness is different than everyday ordinary awareness in that the body and mind are connected. If you've ever gone on autopilot and driven half an hour and you arrive somewhere and you wonder like, what just happened? We've all done it. That's everyday ordinary awareness, or it might even be just kind of caught up in a future or a past thought pattern that is not mindfulness. So when we're in the present moment, this is where the body and mind are integrated and connected. So, dogs and babies are mindful. They are fully in the present moment, and they aren't, especially children, they're not conditioned yet to be up in the mind, using that executive function, that planning, all the intellectual capacity that allows us to do things like the presentation I just watched, like the presentation I put together. So the intellect is quite useful, but it gets us out of the body. And so a practice of mindfulness reintegrates us, reconnects us to that natural joy that dogs and babies have. That tail wag, that smile, that laugh that kids have. The dogs have the tail wag, the kids have the laugh. These are our natural birthright. That joy is our natural birthright. Peace is always here. It just gets covered up by conditioning, by the many, many, many stressors that we're aware of going on in our world. And this practice can help us kind of move those layers back and return back to that place of joy. I love the Viktor Frankl definition where he talks about mindfulness as increasing the space between stimulus and response. So if you've got anybody in your life who pushes your buttons, you know that there's not much space between stimulus and response. And we all have at least one person in our life who pushes our buttons. And mindfulness helps just kind of give a little bit of space to create freedom to choose to respond differently. So the practice, the more that we do this on the cushion or with a body scan or a little bit of a practice here and there, it begins to change how we move through our lives, and it gives us more freedom to live the way we want to. 90% of our thinking is under our conscious awareness. It's unconscious, it's the subconscious. It's like the 90% of the iceberg below the water. And mindfulness gives us access to that conditioning, that pattern thinking, the anxiety, the depression, any stories. We become aware of them with the mindfulness practice so we can make the changes we want. So that if we are stuck, for example, we can get unstuck. If we're feeling stagnant, we can shake it up. So as I said, we need mindfulness more than ever. We're riding the Corona coaster, and I won't belabor this for too long, but I'll just name, many of us have gained at least a part of that COVID-19. As cortisol builds because of stress, we gain weight. Stress also results in a compromised brain function. So the prefrontal cortex, the most recently evolved part of our mammalian brain, it is offline when we are in a stressful mode. And so we can't use that executive function. We can't be creative. We can't connect. And so that results in poor decision-making and reactivity. It also results in burnout. When we're stressed like that, when our limbic system is more online, when our sympathetic nervous system is firing with anxiety and reactivity, that causes burnout because our parasympathetic nervous system is not online. When we are stressed, it can cause inflammation. There are actually studies that say that when we're not moving through things with mindfulness and with awareness, or through journaling, through all the self-care things that exist just for this reason, to process our lives, it leads to inflammation. There are markers of inflammation that exist. There's a study of people in grief, and those who did the journaling, did the counseling, did the processing, had fewer markers of inflammation than the people who ended up stuffing their emotions. So mindfulness helps us work through those emotions just by being with them. Social isolation is a factor for a lot of us. We're either with the same people too much of the time, or we are alone too much if we live alone. And so this can cause stress of all kinds. And mindfulness helps in a number of ways. I've linked at the bottom this mindful.org website link to an article on the ways mindfulness is good for your health. And this one link links to a number of studies that say that it's good for the heart. It decreases cognitive decline. There are studies that Look at 50-year-olds who do mindfulness, and they have brains that have the plasticity of 25-year-olds if they do a steady mindfulness practice. It improves immunity. As I said, those markers of inflammation are lower, reduces cell aging. If you practice gratitude, for example, you actually lengthen a part of your chromosome that delays the aging process. So this stuff actually has been proven by a lot of science for many years to work. I think a lot of you on this call are more aware of it than you would have been maybe 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So a lot of research is coming out that it reduces physical and psychological suffering. And in Buddhism, actually, mindfulness is part of the solution to suffering. It's part of the Eightfold Path. It's fertile ground for living fully, being aware of change that needs to be made and making it, healing, good communication, love. So this is a really great practice, and I'll be giving you a couple of things to try today. We'll do a body scan and we'll do a meditation, and I'll just mention a couple of other practices, include body aware movement, and I'll call one out in particular. I gave you a restorative yoga pose. Some of you may have taken me up on it, and if you did, I'd love to hear how it went. I also teach yin yoga, which is long held stretches, and I'm understanding the more that I practice it that actually is a body involved meditation. It's really powerful to be with your whole self because the mind exists throughout the body. And so when you do things like Tai Chi or slow yoga or anything where you can bring the body and mind together, that's another form of mindfulness. You can also bring mindfulness to tasks, just daily tasks like washing the dishes. Teacher Thich Nhat Hanh says, why do we wash the dishes? To wash the dishes. That's it. So being with the experience of the plate and the soap and the running water and the pleasantness or the neutrality of that, you're just with that one task. And that brings that mindful awareness to the present moment where there's a lot of peace and there's kind of a lot of magic that you can access there. Doing nothing is a wonderful practice, especially if you are allergic to rest, if you're allergic to slowing down. I prescribe a 10-minute of doing nothing practice to my coaching clients. So it's more powerful than you would think when you actually make space for it. So body awareness, I started to say, the mind exists throughout the body. We think of ourselves, especially in Western culture, as, we revere the power of the brain and the mind and the intellect. But if you can think about your big toe, like if you think right now about your right big toe and you wiggle it, your mind is there. And I have a restorative teacher who teaches on my Embody You platform. And she says, when the mind slows down, the body can catch up. The thing to keep in mind is that mindful awareness and this consciousness that we have access to, it moves more slowly. So if you're talking fast, if you're super reactive, if you're in a quick mode, you're probably more in that more primitive mammalian brain. And so mindfulness is a way to re-access your wisest, most strategic, creative, engaged part of yourself. So hopefully I've given you some incentives. And we'll start with a body scan. So you can do this laying down or seated. It'll just be about 5 minutes. Invite you to get comfortable. And if you're sitting, find a nice straight spine. You can close your eyes. If you're laying down, just get your body nice and long and stretched out. And I'll close my eyes so I can't see you. And just notice as you bring your eyes closed, your attention inward, notice the breath in the body. Notice the way the floor underneath you supports your breath. And then bring your attention to the crown of your head, the very top of your head. And we'll spiral our attention from the crown of the head to the forehead and around to the back of the head. back around, across your eyes. And again, just tracing the attention in a spiral around you from head down to toes, wrapping around the neck, taking your attention across the collarbones and along the shoulder blades. And once you get to your right shoulder, you can take that spiral down your arm nice and slow. Eventually making your way to your wrist and your fingers. Take your time. I'll just lead you through to your left shoulder if you're following my words. And spiral your attention down your left arm. And as you take your attention, you're just noticing what's there. Past the elbow to the lower arm, wrist and fingers. Returning to the torso, coming across the chest, around the back, across the belly, around the hips. And then take that spiral in your time down your right leg. Eventually your lower leg. Around the ankle. And once you get to the right foot, find the sole of the foot and pay extra attention to that connection of the sole of the foot to the earth if you're in a chair. And then gradually shift to the top of the left leg and work your way down in the same way. Again, paying extra attention to the sole of the foot. So many energy points, nerve endings down there. It can be very grounding. And once you've finished your spiral, again, just notice the breath and the body. And take an in breath. Release an out breath. And bring yourself back to that ordinary awareness. Blinking eyes open when you're ready. Cool. So we'll have a chance to talk about how the meditation and the body scan went, but just kind of note to yourself what that might have done for you. I find it to be a very powerful thing just to bring attention inward, and we'll do it again with meditation. There are many ways to meditate. Mindfulness is designed to cultivate this special awareness I'm talking about, of this present moment, body-mind connected awareness of what's here. So we're not trying to get anywhere. We're not trying to get calm. When we are with things as they are, calm is a beautiful side effect. Sometimes we have to go through some uncomfortable stuff, but mindfulness gives you this authentic access to the peaceful moment and makes peace a little bit more sustainable, makes calm a little more sustainable rather than this sort of spiritual bypass of taking a relaxation meditation and being told to relax. And then you wake up and you've got to deal with the same thing. So there can be an avoidance that some kinds of meditation can unintentionally provide. So mindfulness is you just go through whatever you're going through to peace. So the job of the mind is to think. So this is a really big thing. Everybody says, oh, I'm not good at meditating. I think the whole time. And I don't even aspire to not think in meditation. It's, if you're thinking, it's not wrong. The job of the mind is to think. The job of you in a mindfulness meditation is to observe that you're thinking and then return your attention to your point of focus. So your point of focus can be observing the breath, listening to sound. You can even use a mantra, I breathe in with the in breath, I breathe out with the out breath. I find I breathe in, I breathe out really helpful for beginner meditators to just track the in and the out. Your mind will wander and then you bring it back. So the mindfulness isn't staying focused, it's returning. It's a muscle that you work and you get better at returning. And trust me, I've been meditating for 20 years. You never stop wandering, you just get better at returning. So we're always going to be human. There's no, Mecca or mountaintop that we arrive at. We just arrive at ourselves and we can return to this integrated body-mind state more readily. Our joy is more accessible, our peace is more accessible. Hopefully I've sold you on meditation enough. I have this technique that I'll lead you through right now. It's called Baba. I came up with it when I was asked to support with meditating with deeper concentration. And there are 3 things. I'll lead you through a meditation where you just focus on one of 2 things, body awareness or breath. And I'll lead you to both. And then you can choose one. And so you have this kind of freedom to focus on one or the other. Thoughts ultimately always weave through. And the A in the last A in Baba is allow. So you just make space and allow for a feeling, a thought, whatever it is. You just don't get on that train coming through. You don't you can't hop on a cloud as it passes through the sky. So just think of errant thoughts and feelings as clouds in the sky, and then you just return your attention to the body and the breath. So we'll give that a try. We'll do this for another 5 minutes or so. So I invite you to drop in, and I'll say that meditation, it's great if you have a straight spine. Sometimes it's nice to sit on the edge of something, the edge of your seat, the edge of a pillow, so that your pelvis, the top of your pelvis is tilted forward, so you have that nice natural lumbar curve of your spine. Put your feet flat on the floor. You do not need to have your legs crossed. You can if you like, but if it is painful, skip it. And as I said, prop the hips up. So once you're ready, we will practice that meditation, finding that straight spine, turning attention inward. You can gaze down if you're not comfortable closing eyes. And different than the body scan, we will just take the attention anywhere in the body that's calling your attention. Maybe you're curious about the muscles of the face and whether they're holding tension. Maybe there's sensation in another part of the body that is just noticeable. And as you bring your awareness to the body, maybe you've already noticed the way it moves as you breathe. You notice the belly and the chest expanding with the in-breath, releasing with the out-breath. Thoughts might be floating by. The mind might wander. And you just return it to body sensations or the breath. If you're extra floaty, you might bring extra attention to the seat, the way your hips interface with your chair, the way your feet ground to the floor. And rather than resisting any thought or feeling that floats through, you just allow it. Another few breaths in our little meditation. Another big breath in and out. And as you're ready, blink eyes open. And if you had anything that you experienced that you have questions about, there's a chat kind of on the top right. You can click it and let me know your experience, or if you have questions. And if not, I'll just continue on. So taking mindfulness practice off the cushion, you can bring in that body aware movement, walking meditation, again, the mindful awareness during tasks, dishes, eating, driving, doing that nothing practice. The more that you do it, the more that you find it's that awareness, that checking in happens more naturally, but you can even put a reminder in your phone of what's happening right now, just to inquire of yourself. I recommend 5 to 12 minutes of meditation daily if you can do it. And there's a Zen expression. If you have time to meditate, do it 20 minutes a day. And if you don't have time, meditate for 1 hour a day. So it's this idea of we need it more. If we think we're too busy to meditate, we probably need it more. And the point that I was, doing my best to make today is that mindfulness can happen all day. It's like a radio station that you can tune into. And these practices support you in doing that. As I said, mindfulness awareness eventually happens by itself, and it's mostly about unlearning our conditioning. And there's some spontaneous joy and peace that you might get if you're mindful. So a warning here that you might start catching and heading off problems as they start, improving your strategic and critical thinking. You might become a better employee, partner, friend, or boss. So I think that's all I had. I'm almost at time, so I will just leave you guys with a quiz that I mentioned. It's just as a thank you. This is a really useful tool of, if you're hitting a wall, how can you use mindfulness to get unstuck? So I'll include that in the chat. You are welcome to take it. It's a free quiz, and it gives you an assessment. We all have different blocks that get us stuck. It might be action, it might be clarity, we might be allergic to resting. Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that it can support you. I see Danielle said, I'm feeling very refreshed. Thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. And I'll just include my email as well. So if you guys want to reach out to me, info. So thank you so much. Hope you all have a beautiful rest of the summit. I'll be tuning in.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.